Ready? Good afternoon and welcome everybody to this session where we're really going to look at top-down but very much locally led actions on drought. The CGIAR is an organization of 15 research centers, and we come together bringing in so many different areas of drought management, whether it's water management or early forecasting or drought insurance or drought resilient crops. We come together to be able to bring that expertise into drought management. What we want to feature today is one of the what's called a CGIAR research project and an initiative where it's very much looking at locally led adaptation. Drought mitigation, drought resilience building does not can't be thought about at a very high level. It has to reflect local environmental conditions, local political, social, economic, cultural conditions. And we want to be able to bring that together because that's how we really are going to be able to mobilize change. So we're going to focus on what's called the CGIAR ClimBeR in action. This is an innovative initiative that's focused on empowering local communities to lead drought-proofing efforts. And it emphasizes the critical role of youth, gender, Indigenous people and local communities building drought resilience. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on some case studies. We are going to look at southern Zambia. We're going to look at India. We're bringing in friends from Cairo, from Egypt, because we know it's those conditions, those local capabilities to be able to bring insight. And we are delighted to also have the UNCCD joining us. And we know the power of your engagements here and of those conversations with the parties. These are all needed to join up local non-state actors, parties, because that's how we're really going to be able to drive drought catalysts and action. So I'm first of all going to ask my colleague Girish Amanath to give a keynote. It's about scaling drought resilience through locally led action. Over to you, Girish.
Thank you, Rachel, for having this introduction to the locally led action. The intervention, what we plan to do in this side event is to present the recent CGIAR initiatives on climate resilience program. And we have national experts coming from Zambia and India will be providing specific country insights. Can I request the television person to share my presentation? Yeah. So, today everybody is talking about local action because with significant climate vulnerability, what we more need to talk about is local action. And while local actions are happening everywhere, one of the bottlenecks we talk about is the lack of scaling efforts, where we need to have viable business model when we talk about local action. And can I move to the next slide? This one. Okay. Now, we are in the second week of UNCCD, so I don't need to talk about rising drought severity. If you are staying for the week one, you might have been always listening about drought intensity, frequency, water scarcity issues, rising temperature. We are talking about food production losses, etc. I would not repeat this part, but I just want to start with an example because I love country of Zambia a lot because I'm looking at the ClimBeR program in Zambia. What you can see here, this was much well predicted in El Nino. So 2024, in July, the meteorological global agencies already forecasted El Nino impact. And what you see is a cascaded impact in different sector, water sector, drinking water, and the hydropower issues, right? So the CGIAR dam, for the first time, we are seeing the base flow in their life, and the plants have started growing in the reservoir now for the first time because the reservoir levels have come down significantly low. And what we have not seen is not just about Zambia. The whole of Southern Africa have declared drought in the region. And I just want to also talk about a bit more where you look at the wider impact now. We look at the IMF have given a forecast of offing their GDP, the gross domestic product, by 50%, which is reported by IMF. And we are not just talking about just the water and crop. We are also talking about inflations in the highest inflation in the last 25 months. We are also seeing energy, tourism, and other sectors are equally affected, right? So when we talk about national issues, we do have sectoral problem. Now we are talking about much more challenges of clearing forest because communities do not have income. So they are clearing the forest and making charcoal as an alternative source of energy for cities which are dependent on energy capacity to look at. You're also seeing a problem in people today go to restaurant in Zambia not for eating food, they go for charging their laptops and mobile, right? So that's a big problem. Andrea and I was having a Indian chicken tikka masala, but now we are seeing the people are going not for eating food, for charging their mobiles and laptop, right? So the local led adaptation is very, very pivotal when we talk about actions at the ground. And that's where we want to talk about context specific, sustainable local action is the need of the hour. So how do we do that? There are a lot of local scale intervention our CG centers have been looking at for a long time. One is our main focus is increasing resilience, adaptation program, increasing productivity, but importantly also enhancing the livelihood security because we are talking about household level intervention. Then we have a lot of natural resource management we have to look at the broader watershed level or at a farms level intervention. This could be fodder, feed supply, market access. This could be also having credible monitoring and early warning information, knowing when the drought is going to happen. Importantly, the kind of institutions that are quite silo at the local scale, we need to make sure those institutions are working together when we talk about using the forecast data. And the last but not least, despite all that, the extreme shocks are going to be much severe. So we need to work with a household level risk insurance program like crop insurance or any other catastrophic. So all these interventions are needed when we talk about local action. And there are different interventions you can do. Access to finance, providing knowledge, providing nutrient, because in the drought, the problem is also being nutrient smart as well. Children may not have sufficient food, sufficient diversification. So we are going to talk on Monday, the drought and the health impact and the climate services, water and land smart intervention. So all these local scale interventions need to be looked at much closely. And I just want to say the framework of our locally led drought adaptation look at two areas. One is the principle. We need to make sure it is inclusive and equity. We are not talking about irrigated farmers who need really an inclusivity because they have guaranteed water. But in the rainfed and the women and the youth, they need to look at building the indigenous knowledge. We have always seen more than climate services, indigenous knowledge also overtake the responsibility of coordination and also co-creation and co-ownership. This is the important part we need to focus on. Without community ownership, it is equally difficult to say the buy-in of the local action. And the enablers are basically policy and government. CGIAR as an institution is not an implementing organization. We provide research for development. So we need to work with government institution to make sure that the governance is much more integrated into those local action. The last other part is also ensuring that we focus on microfinance, micro loan, because a lot of local action comes with investments. With the private sector, the government also is bringing a lot of investment and the capacity building. So what we have done it for few communities. How do we provide better knowledge sharing for other region, right? So I'm going to show some example of what we did it in ClimBeR. We set up this entire integrated model, setting up a solar panel, storage tank, which is about 15,000 liter storage capacity or 10,000 roughly. And we have provided a distribution system for 12 different points. So the villagers can go and take that water points and they can grow their home gardening. They have set up their systems for livestock. So water is a critical factor for climate action, right? Water providing for high value crops, water for livestock, water for drinking purpose and domestic use. So having done this, we have these principles. My colleague Carol will also speak more about that. But you can see this is a positive impact we have delivered. The community ownership, as I said, is a very critical part. Farmers are now, the women farmers are growing for the first time the high value crops like tomato or any other sweet potato, vegetable leaves. You can see that they can able to also bring it to the local market now. The woman is selling the crop and the voices have to be heard from the community itself. What kind of design and intervention the community would like to take it forward. I just want to say at the end of the day, the business models are very, very critical for scaling. What we have shown an intervention is for an indigenous population of 900 communities or so. So here we talk about building a public-private people partnership. You know, always we talk about public-private people partnership is very, very critical. And a community-driven enterprise is also equally important. You know, we need to drive them to become more accelerator by themselves. And the blended financial model is equally important to go forward. Seed systems, water sector, livestock sector, all have to work together with a scaling partner. My last summary for call of action is to look at scalability roadmap is needed at the national level, at the subnational level, because the local actions are the one that will drive really an acceleration, which is what we would be also presenting more on Tuesday, 3 p.m. EME-led CGIAR program called the Drought Action Catalyst Program, where we'll be clearly talking about what would be the opportunity on addressing vulnerable population and the drought response strategy, and the collaboration opportunity, building a viable partnership, and last but not least, bringing more local leadership itself, because we are not going to be there forever. Bringing that knowledge, bringing that leadership within the community and making sure that they are built better, responded to future climate shock, right? I think this is my last slide. Thank you so much for staying with us. So I would now pass it on to you, or let me just invite two experts joined online due to their limited time and constraint. I hope we can see them in the, we have Carol Meva from Zambia joining us. She is a IME consultant. I hope you can hear us, Carol.
Good afternoon, I can hear you.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Carol. So why don't you start your insights, reflections from Zambia now? Over to you.
Thank you so much. Just allow me to share my screen. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see you.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Carol Mwemba. I'm a consultant, an IME consultant based in Zambia. And a lot of things that Dr. Giriraj has already spoken about relate to the project that I'm going to be talking about. So the topic is looking at community-driven drought proofing solution for water security. So just in brief, I think this has already been highlighted. The area that I'm interested in talking about is called Hanzila. This is in Monze district, and Monze district is actually based in the southern part of Zambia. And I have heard that in the conversations from the past week, you've been talking about areas that have been highly hit by droughts, and Monze district is one of them. Even now, as I'm speaking, they've not received drops of rain, even when other parts of the country, for example, in the northern part of Zambia, it has been raining and a little bit in Lusaka. For Monze people, there is no rain up to now, and people are still waiting so that they can see if they can actually plant. So this is a region which is one of the most hit in Zambia. Now, when it comes to community-driven drought proofing solutions, when it relates to water supply, we see that rural communities do not just sit and do nothing when they face difficulties, when they face challenges. They've actually devised different measures to survive the water scarcity situations. And this really allows them to continue accessing water for domestic uses, irrigation, and water for livestock, because we see that these are some of the important uses of water for these areas. What is even more interesting for me when we're doing this research on Hanzila was to discover that there are some existing normative frameworks that are in place, be it within a community or intra-community, looking at just different people that are sharing this limited water resource. So let me start by speaking a little bit about the open sources. You will see in the picture how dry the area is. And local streams will tend to dry, especially during the months in August all the way to October there. All these open streams will dry. But when they have water, they serve the populations with water, for example, to irrigate their crops, livestock, and sometimes domestic uses. So when most of these sources dry up, people will start making scoop holes. Below here on the picture, you can also see one of those solutions that people feel they can actually rely on. So you can already see the magnitude of the problem, because if people are relying on solutions like scoop holes within the ground, it signifies that there's a very big problem when it comes to water access. Now, with regards to drinking water, mostly they rely on boreholes, and even when accessing water for drinking and domestic uses, we continue to see different kinds of management and water conservation arrangements that are at play. When other important sources of water dry up, for example, the wells or the open sources, villages remain with limited sources, for example, a hand pump. So to manage this, they'll develop community rules where they all agree, for example, to discontinue activities like gardening, so that they reserve the water for the purposes of drinking, because they realize that this is something that is primarily life-saving for them. Now, to support local solutions to improve access, Dr. Giriraj has already spoken a little bit about this borehole. The ClimBeR supported the development of a solar-powered borehole intended to enhance access to water for irrigation, for livestock, and also for domestic uses. Still, when we look at the sustainability of this resource and ensuring that the impacts of any future water scarcity in the community are lessened, it is also achieved by applying specific rules of access within community. So now, to use the water from the solar borehole, we have seen that communities have jointly devised rotational routines that require people to get water for different uses at different times. I'll give an example. Like when they say we are getting water for drinking and domestic uses, this is allowed throughout the day. But when it comes to accessing water for cattle or any livestock, they would have allocated a two-hour period from noon until 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Then when they are looking at accessing water for irrigation, this is actually achieved way in the late afternoon, when other important sources have already been done. So what we are seeing here is there are rules in place within the community, and there is a committee in place that is ensuring that this limited resource that people have is governed well, to ensure that there's, first of all, access for different needs is satisfied, and also it responds to various priorities within the community, but also that communities do not overburden the infrastructure to allow it to continue pumping water throughout the day. So it's given time to rest. And really, when we look at all these solutions, it's meant to minimize the risk of water scarcity at livelihood level, and also that people should come up with ways. These are some of the ways that people have come up with to limit the risk of of the drought and the impacts of climate change. I will end here. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Carol, for providing this excellent insights from the program led in Hanzulla in Monzai district in Southern Province. Now I would invite Dr. K.V. Rao, Director for Drought Management at the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. Over to you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, Dr. Giri. I hope you're able to see my screen.
We can see.
Okay. My name is K.V. Rao. I'm working for Indian Council of Agriculture Research, and our institute is Central Research Institute for Dryland Agriculture located in southern part of India. Our mandate is the dryland areas of the country. We have about 50% of our area, cultivated area is under rainfed conditions. And as you can see, we have about 25.24 million hectares of rainfed area having less than 750 millimeters, where quantum is a main issue as well as its occurrence also. And in the other areas where we have rainfed areas, the quantum as well as management are main issues. When we look at the drought preparedness, we obviously look at in terms of technology development and its dissemination, real-time interventions, forecast and its advisories we look at, and the policy support. And for a country like ours in India, where we have a diverse rainfed conditions across and diverse cropping systems prevalent, we work with at a location-specific technologies development. And we work with state agricultural universities across the country. You can see that our spread across the country, we have centers across different rainfall regions as well as cropping systems region. And we work for development of the location-specific crop and cropping systems identification, the water conservation methods with appropriate machinery that can be used for conserving water within the field, intercropping systems identification. When I say intercropping systems, as we have a system of rainfall wherein we get from June to December, and we have crops for a longer period of time covering both crops of short duration as well as long duration. And this is one of the drought management mechanism which we use. So that's where the intercropping systems plays an important role. And in order to address other issues of in terms of water production, etc., we look at agroforestry as well as for silvicultural systems development across. And we work along with these state agricultural universities, as I said, and we work for the location development of specific technologies. And when it comes to drought management in real time, what we look at is in terms of it starts with the preparedness at the local level pre-season, as well as during the season and post-rainy season. So we use effectively the seasonal forecast, and we conduct interface meetings with each of the states. We have 29 states. We conduct meetings with them, and we look at in terms of the forecast and it's whatever the input supplies that are needed, and try to mobilize the farming communities for impending the risk during the season. And during this status, we look at in terms of how much amount of rainfall has happened, how much is the deficiency, etc. And as you can see, this is how we use the forecast. We use the forecast at the national level, taking it, which is available for complete India, and we look at the spatial forecast for the specific districts, specific states, and for specific districts, and we identify what are the areas where it can be, where there is going to be a probability of drought. And we also use the forecast for the monthly ones. And we use all this information to bring awareness among the officials in terms of for the preparedness. And the preparedness would be happening at the district level. And we also have documents called technical documents, which we call them district agriculture contingency plans. This is a national initiative made by ICAR through through Ministry of Agriculture, and we have got all the 650 rural district plans are developed, and these are also ingested into the drought management portal, South Asia Drought Management Systems. And we have detailed documentation in terms of the drought for rainfed situations as well as for irrigated systems also, covering various cropping as well as farming systems within the specific district, and we look at various scenarios where it can happen. And these are the documents which are used by the machinery at the district level, sub-district level information, and they would be using this whenever for the technical information what is to be done, and which would be passed on to the state, the farming communities. And we also have a national level initiative where we say it is a technology demonstration component. This is under National Innovation in Climate Resilient Agriculture. We are having the field level demonstrations across the country in about 151 districts, where drought is a very predominant one in these 151 districts. And we look at not only for agriculture, we look at all the sectors of agriculture, including NRM interventions also. And livestock is also covered in this. And these are some of the interventions we take at the field level. These are done through our Krishi Vigyan Kendras, what we call them farm science centers. And we look at the drought preparedness when we say, basically, we identify at the ground level in the village, along with the communities, identify the opportunities for water harvesting within the village and in the agriculture fields also, and make use of it whenever there is a lack of sufficient rains. And you can see across the spectrum, across different states, how it is being used. Both the in situ conservation measures through equipment, what we do for harvesting more amount of rainfall on the field itself, so that whenever there is a drought, the crops can withstand for that for a particular longer period of time. And in the high rainfall regions, we also have these water harvesting systems which could be used for supplemental irrigations. And while doing this, one of the important exercises, we collect all these technologies compiled at each of the state level, and we prepare them and we share with the State Department of Agriculture, which would be used in their particular developmental programs under agriculture and allied sectors. And this is one of the, we have developed this sort of documents for 25 states in our country. And these are widely used in the state development, particular agriculture programs like POCRA, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rao. As you can see from this too, one is the institution like ICR is preparing the local action plan. And what we heard from Carol is more of intervention at a household level, how water is an enabler for resilience practices. So with that, I would now pass the floor to Dr. Rachel, Deputy Director General, IMI, to provide panel.
Thank you, Girish. And I would love to have join on. So we have three panelists who are going to bring their insight to us. We have Carol. Thank you for staying online, Carol. I'd like to ask Dr. Dahlia to come and join us on stage, and Dr. Siu Loof. Dr. Dahlia is the assistant professor from Cairo Higher Institute of Engineering and a board member of the IWRA Egypt chapter. And Dr. Sulu is an associate program officer at UNCCD Secretariat. So Carol, I'm going to go to you first. What lessons have you learned from implementing grassroots drought-proofing strategies, and how can these be scaled while preserving local ownership? Carol,
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Really, for me, one of the key takeaways that I have learned implementing drought-proofing strategies, especially at community level, is to see that community-driven solutions should always precede any kind of solution that the government or donors or any implementer actually comes up with. Because when we are allowing communities to develop their solutions, it is first of all very context specific. It responds to the needs that they identify and they live with on a daily basis, which means that whatever solutions they come up with is better aligned with the issues that people face on a day-to-day basis. So in this context, I would say ensuring that there's adequate community engagement when we see that communities actually participate in coming up with solutions that are best suited to their needs, there's also enhanced ownership. Again, I want to highlight on participation of all community members. We have seen sometimes that there are people within rural communities that are most vulnerable or belonging to poor households that would sometimes want to shun away from participating in activities that relate to development or something to do with adaptation within a community. As long as it's a joint activity, they might not want to participate. So it's also important to create platforms that are inviting. The environment should be very inviting for everybody to participate and come up with joint solutions that actually respond to the needs of the entire community. And that's how we ensure that there is inclusive there is inclusivity in everything that we do that relates to community development. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carol. So it's actually helping people to understand it's worth their time. There's participation. There has to be some response. People are very busy wherever you are in this world. So that inclusiveness is a bit saying it is worth you coming and being part of all of that. Carol, my second question to you is, what challenges do communities face in securing external resources? We know we often need to bring additional input, whether it's financing or wherever it might be. So what do communities face in securing external resources or aligning local actions with broader climate adaptation frameworks?
Yes, I'm speaking very much in the context of rural communities because, excuse me, this is where, sorry, this is where most of this research has been based. And what we see as one of the key challenges that communities face in securing external resources is definitely the lack of knowledge on how to access this external support. So lack of knowledge is a challenge. I want to highlight that in some communities within Zambia, we have experiences where some NGOs will be supporting communities with information on how to equip themselves to demand for certain their entitlements or skills or skills on how to engage the local government or any government for that matter. This gives them the power to know how to position their requests, but the majority of the people do not have such kind of access to this information. So when they lack this information, they first of all do not know that certain they should access funds for their own adaptation activities within the communities because they do not have this information. So there's need to build that kind of knowledge within the communities. Then the second thing that we see are these top-down approaches. When we look at climate change adaptation projects that are developed within our country, some of them actually follow this top-down, for example, from the national level all the way to the district, and then they reach the communities. This sometimes we see that it actually creates misalignment with those bottom-up approaches that people already have or already plan that already highlight the real needs that they need to be addressing. So there should be a balance. There should always be a balance between trying to understand what a high-level government is trying to achieve and what is actually relevant to the people on the ground. The last thing that I want to look at is competing priorities with the available resources. I speak sadly because I see that in my country we have a big debt crisis, debt situation, and some of that funds that is supposed to be allocated to developing communities or supporting communities to adapt, or even in terms of resilience, is taken away to for example, to debt servicing. So we see that these priorities will go before what is needed to be managed within the communities, and this is how come communities fail to access these limited resources that is available. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it's that balancing top down where we can mobilize, we can make change at a much more powerful level, but actually making sure that at the community, local levels, you have the funds, you have that support to be able to, because that's really where the change has to take place. It can't take place in our capital cities. So Dr. Dalia, thank you for joining us today. Can I ask you a question? And bringing in your university and science background, how can science-based tools and local indigenous knowledge systems be brought together, be integrated to improve early warning systems and adaptive responsibilities to drought?
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. Thank you for the invitation and this important question. I would say that the community knowledge is very important in especially in areas where people suffer from disasters. The first thing we need to do is to look at the past look at the practices that old people used to do, and then we try to incorporate these practices in our present time. Local community knowledge and the indigenous people knowledge is very important. It's like a weapon for fighting the risk we have in the present time. We should use this knowledge as, for example, as a civil society. We go to these people on the ground. We talk to them. We hold training programs and workshops to understand from them what they used to do this before, what their ancestors used to do to fight this problem with drought in the area, and try to incorporate the new science and the new innovative technology. Like we tell them that we need to you need to report real-time data to tell us when you observe that there is a low water level in the river or in the canal. If you have problems with the soil salination or the soil any problem with crops, the decrease in the crops. To have this communication ongoing with local people and get to know their own practices and try to help them with the new innovative technology. So I think by this we can combine both together and work with them on the ground to help these communities.
Thank you. I know when we had the MENA Drought project, we went and asked lots of people, how do you do drought monitoring now?
Yes.
And it was to do with where the birds were nesting in the trees. And there were a whole bunch of other triggers that communities used to say, there is a drought coming, or there is, it's on its way.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we need to do is compare that to the satellite pictures that we produce to see which one is actually more accurate.
Exactly.
I think there's lots that we can do, and definitely it's those bringing them together. One of the challenges these days is that the droughts are more frequent and they're more intense. So what used to work is not always able to work as well now. And I think it's that coming together. Do we need those drought resilient adaptations, the genetic changes, because those droughts are just so tough now that the previous methods weren't always going to bring it. My second question to you is really getting a little insight on what are you working on? What are the most promising innovations in drought monitoring or prediction that can empower communities to take timely, localized action?
Well, as you know, nowadays we have the AI, we have the Internet of Things, and we have abundance of data. We're trying to collect data through the, as you said, the satellite images and the monitoring systems. So we have too many data, and the data is already available, and we trying to incorporate this data with and inform the people about it. Try to transfer this knowledge to them. As I said, through some training or workshops or so on. Also, we trying to use apps to help them, and I think one of the projects also, I don't remember, it was the FAO. I remember they went to the farmers and they installed these apps on their mobiles to help them to predict when they need to irrigate their crops, when they need to put more water, to inform them about the water conservation practices, how to not only to, the drought is the creeping disaster. I mean, like it doesn't happen at once, so we need to prepare ourselves ahead, so to know when we can take action. So through these apps and platforms, we're trying to inform people about the disaster and how they can take action to help them.
Thank you. Thank you. And absolutely there. So my next question is to you, Dr. Siu. Can you help us understand a little bit about finance and governance? What innovative financing and governance models are needed to empower local communities in leading drought-proofing actions whilst making sure there's long-term resilience there?
Okay, thank you very much. In order to ensure the long-term resilience through the financial approach, I think the most important factor so far, especially for some developing countries, is the financial awareness. Because of based on some of my personal experiences, I would like to say, not all people, not all stakeholders realize what is drought finance or in more general, development finance. Like when I was an expert supporting a so-called drought financial committee, they will ask, like a central bank expert says, oh, I know my job is setting the interest rate to control inflation, but I don't know how this will make more water, will have more rainfall so that you have more water to drink or more water to support agriculture. And the Ministry of Ecology or Agriculture person comes, oh, I know how to make grassland greener instead of more yellow, but I don't know how to set bank interest rate because to my knowledge, finance is more like a stock market or interest like I borrow a loan, I have to pay the mortgage. How this can make the grassland greener? So the two supporting steps I would like to emphasize. One is to improving the awareness through campaigns and education. Secondly, is to make more joint efforts, at least to make more interdisciplinary, cross-department and cross-sector dialogues so that people knows each other, knows the expertise more, and therefore have more cross-disciplinary expertise to implement these financial and drought financial models. Thank you.
Absolutely. So it's those different types of finance we can do. And we haven't really even talked about insurance a lot. We know that can also help stimulate, not only help take away the sting of the drought when it's there, but also particularly when you bundle it, we can have drought resistant seeds and fertilizers and that included in the payment, because often farmers would welcome beyond cash, just the ability to get back up onto their feet again quickly. And our last question is, what mechanisms can governments implement to ensure long-term funding and support for locally led drought resilience initiatives?
Okay, I see. Thank you. So I think a lot of good government practice in terms of drought finance, especially at the community level, is the small insurance or the small finance. Because at the community level, the stakeholders who request the financial support are usually individuals, households, or small-scale farms. Therefore, the scale is not very big. In terms of the traditional financial perspective, these financial approaches are not likely to generate a lot of profits because the management cost is high, while the returns are not that substantial. Therefore, the government intervention on this gap is necessary to provide enough incentives for the financial agencies to provide more small-scale supporting schemes to ensure the final kilometer is reached or is delivered. Thank you for this very interesting question. Thank you.
It is. They're trickling down to make the actions happen on the ground, and it's so hard. How do you do that? We know there's all sorts of monitoring and checks and balances. Of course, there has to be that. But actually, we also want to just get it going and work with that. So those are the questions I had for the panel. Did the audience have any possible questions they would like to either ask Carol from Zambia or Dalia from Egypt or CEO, sorry, from UNCCD? No? Andre?
Thank you. Fascinating and critically important topic. Now, I don't want to talk about myself, but just to give you a little bit of background, I attended my first COP in Dakar in 1998. That's 26 years ago. I grew up on a ranch in South Africa, and I've been studying integrated crop livestock systems for the last 30 years in Africa. I understand drought. I want to echo what a lot of people say when we talk about drought management. And drought management is that thing that you do between droughts, not when the drought is announced. And often, referring to finance, we find it very difficult to get funding to finance drought management during the high rainfall years because nobody is stressing about drought. But if we do not put management strategies in place between droughts, then it becomes very difficult to manage the drought. Because by the time the drought is announced, there is very little you can do. So I had discussions with some of my colleagues in buses driving in Africa and in Zambia that a lot of us spend a huge amount of money on predicting droughts. Whereas, yes, that's good. That is very important. We need to do that. But I'm beginning to feel that we need to explore how can we use that same technology to predict high rainfall years to put us in a better position to stock up for the next drought. So that balance between how we make use of good opportunities and good rainfall years so that we can stock up on food and feed, so that we can manage the next drought better. And I think I sat through this COP listening to a lot of this stuff, and I don't hear people talking about how we use the good years to manage the bad years. We just talk about identifying the bad years and then how do we manage them. Because if we manage the good years well, we can store the food, increase the income, and create the resilience for the drought between the drought years. So I can't emphasize that enough, but I don't see it happening. And I think we need to bring that kind of thinking into the narrative on drought management. Thank you.
I think that's a critical point. And whether it's the 7 good years and the 7 bad years or wherever, it might be some sort of religious context or just smart management. Even, your own personal finance, you always manage your good years to get you through that. Where are those solutions? Is the cold storage or the grain stores or the forage stores for animals? Maybe we're not focusing enough on those good years and it's very reactive for the bad years. Hi.
Hello. I have a question for Dr. Suyu. So the drought issue all over the world is very different. Each country, each city, each community have facing different issues. And the local experts also have different initiative on the case study. So how they can share the experience and connect each other. Is there any platform to share the experience so the scientists can share and learn from each other?
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very glad that you'll be able to respond to the two audience questions. To my colleague Dao, yes. Well, indeed, a lot of different experience from different countries or regions. And at the moment, I'm very glad to share that the UNCCD has developed a community of learning and practice on drought management, which on next Tuesday, we will officially launch it, but it's already in shape, have more than 300 users of that online platform. With that platform, UNCCD encourages the stakeholders and the users to exchange their knowledge, information, such as sharing the lessons and learned experience gains, knowledge obtained from each community, countries, or regions with each others, so that we can avoid repeating the same mistakes while we can learn the better lessons from our neighbors or existing examples. And taking the gentleman's comments on the financial issues, indeed, I would like to say it is really challenging for the drought finance and the drought, and when the drought comes in true, when it takes place, it's usually too late to do something more effective. And that's why UNCCD and also a few other UN organizations and international organizations, such as the WMO, have established a number of early warning systems on droughts. And this has been, UNCCD has a so-called UNCCD Drought Toolbox to provide a number of information so that the people can refer to the toolbox to help them to do the early warning and the forecasting so that they can do something in advance rather than passively when drought happens and then we take some remedy efforts. Okay, thank you. I stop here. I pass.
Dr. Dahlia, your thoughts on both those questions?
Yeah, I would like to say that regarding that we don't do things for the good days when we have rainy days. That's why I need to emphasize the importance of having these national drought plans and showing having a national dialogue in these countries with all sectors and all stakeholders and actors in the country on a national level, and also incorporate this in the education for early education to young students, to educate them about drought, and because this is something they face in their countries. So I think it's very important to have this education and plan on the national level, not only on the international level.
Just trying to see if Carol is still there. She's still there. I think she might have just left. Okay.
I'm here.
Carol, were you able to hear the two questions from here? Are you able to respond? The first one is about using the good years to handle this badges, and then the question about finance and that. Are you able to bring any insight from your work in Zambia?
I can talk about the aspect of the good years and the bad years.
Okay.
Yes, we've had years with good rains, and we have had a bumper harvest in Zambia where we actually end up exporting some of those the excess grain. I think this, with what is happening right now, it's a big lesson for the country, because if we could be in a position to reserve what is in excess, I don't think a lot of people would be facing the severe hunger that especially people in the southern province are facing right now. There's been declaration of hunger since last year up to now, when we had opportunities previously to make good of the grains that we had produced. I think it's a good thought. It's something that governments should be thinking about, and something that can actually be even institutionalized so that it becomes something that the country prioritizes. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. I'm going to hand back to Girash. This is very much Girash. Oh, please, a question. Yes, please. Hi.
Hi. I was just going to add on what he said about being proactive.
Yes.
And also the beautiful example of what happened in the land of Egypt, of the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. I think the government need to be proactive. Carol, I was very happy to listen to the presentation. I think coming from Zambia as well, I can attest to what she just talked about. I think the drought we're experiencing right now in Zambia is one of the worst droughts we've ever had. Yep. However, there are some provinces or districts which are receiving good rains, and we need to have, strategies, and ways of the government being proactive and intentional in making sure that despite other areas being dry, for those areas where there's good rain, they can maximize the opportunities, whether it's engaging private sector to invest more in agriculture. I think that would really help. And like always being reactive, and I think that has not really helped us a lot. Thank you.
Good insight. So it might be different years, but it might even be in the same country at the same year. So different geographies, and being able to link that up. And that comes to transport systems and cold storage and cold movements. There's lots of, as we begin to unpick that, and I know some of the challenges in Zambia are to do with the electricity, the power cuts. And that affects a much larger area than just where the drought is. So when whole river systems are impacted and the hydroelectric power generation is bad, and I was reading some of the numbers from WFP. It's talking about this is the drought of the century, and 27 million people. This was in October, and we're now going into the lean years. It's so sobering, and such a large area in Southern Africa being impacted. And now with La Nina coming, the forecasts coming out for the Horn of Africa.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, sorry, just on that on electricity, I think what makes it worse also in Zambia is that the dependence on hydropower has been so bad because for those who would want to do irrigation, they cannot do it because we depend on hydropower. So if you want to move away from the rain-fed agriculture and you want to irrigate, you still can't do it because there's no power. Yeah. There was a period when we only had 1 hour of power the whole day. And then they would increase by 2 hours, 3 hours. So I think that's how bad it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. I have one small question for Dr. Carol. So I'm from Vietnam and from tropical countries, and we have a lot of food and food is cheap. But now I'm living in Qatar and the food is so expensive and the land is actually cannot grow anything. And yes, when we talk about drought solution, we have a crop resilience, some drought resilient crop like dates. But in Qatar, the very common farming techniques is hydroponics, and it's costly. It's very costly. So I want to ask you, in Zambia, is this hydroponics common? And do you think it can be the future of drought solution for the farmers? Yeah, thank you.
Let me start by saying most of Zambia is quite rural. And these technologies that are high in better income areas, we do not have such kind of technologies. Even the kind of irrigation that most farmers would do is sometimes even the conveyance means of just moving water through a pipe from a tap to the garden. Sometimes those are missing. They'll be using buckets to do that kind of irrigation. So when we talk about the commonality of the solution, I don't know what that solution is that you just mentioned, but I would imagine it's something that the region has worked on to improve irrigation. We do not have such kind of technologies in the country. First of all, it's also it's a third world country, and there are a lot of new things that we do not have yet. And the solutions for water are not as vast as in other countries. So I wouldn't say we see a lot of that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are very close to that, our session. First of all, thanks to Rachel for moderating the session, and also all the speakers and panelists for joining, and also the listening participants staying with us. I know it's a very difficult time in COP16 to find experts and being with us in the side event, but quite a handful of people were there in the beginning part of the session. I think while we talk about climate change and uncertainty, communities want really an inspiring local actions. So I think while investments goes at the local action is really tiny, while most of the interventions are at the national level. So having a knowledge or compendium of all the local action interventions, often the problem is that dialogue of knowledge sharing of best practices. If we share that to the community itself is a best way of how community leaders can own those local action and start building resilience on their own, while the national government budgets are very tiny and limited. With more shocks, I think context-specific interventions have to be reach out to the community so that they can, manage those climate shocks which are recurrently happening. Like we were expecting in Zambia, the rain should come, but it is not happening the same way. Last 2 years before the rain happened. Last year, rainfall failure. This year is already a rainfall failure. So the governments are in panic button what they are going to do. So local actions are very, very need of the hour now, but donors have to invest in those local action going forward. With that, I think we will close the session here. I do believe the Riyadh Action Agenda and many other global commitments will reflect importance of local action going forward. Thank you everyone for joining with us. See you on Monday again. Thank you.